Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Right for Kids TV. And my guest today is Jane Friedman. Jane is a professor at the University of Cincinnati. She's the author of The Future of Publishing, Enigma Variations, and also the author of the Beginning Writer's Answer Book. Jane served as managing editor of Writer's Digest magazine, lead editor of Writer's Digest books, and publisher and strategic leader of Writer's Digest writing community. And we're here today to talk about the future of publishing. It is really an honor. Thanks very much, Jane.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah. Let me start by asking you a little bit about what you teach at the University of Cincinnati.
Well, I teach in the e-media division, which focuses on training future media professionals. So I teach a wide range of things, everything from the basics of writing across all media to media ethics, which is not an oxymoron.
Right.
This quarter I'm teaching a digital marketing and advertising class, and next quarter I'll be teaching a history media class. So I do a lot of different things, but I always teach writing. That's one thing that's assigned to me every quarter.
Well, it sounds cool. Just to show you how things have changed, when I went to a journalism school in Syracuse way back when, my first freshman year, we actually learned how to set type. So, things have changed. That, by the way, a skill that did me absolutely no good, but I paid a lot of money for that. So your students who are undergrads, mostly?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do they even understand the kind of kerfuffle about publishing now? Does it even make sense to them, having grown up so digitally?
I don't think so. Typically when I talk about a lot of the change that's happening, I think they take it for granted that the way the world is today is the way it always was. I mean, they're not that naive. They realize there's been a lot of disruption, but I don't think they get what the big deal is all about.
when they think about a book, do they think about the same thing we do?
I think they do. Of course, they're primarily experiencing books these days as things foisted on them by teachers. So they're typically always thinking about the price. Can they get it cheaper? Can they find it free online? So they're in an interesting period where I don't think they're approaching books as something to consume or enjoy, but something that is required of their classes.
Right.
It'll be interesting because so many of the students do look for pirated versions of texts. I wonder if that will continue once they're out of school. They don't really see anything wrong, and I to some extent I agree with them, with just taking texts online for free if they can find them.
Having grown up, these kids with the internet, with the blogs and texting and what have you, do they just view books as another extension of that, or something separate? I mean, we grew up, I think, viewing books, books here, movies here, music here. Mm-hmm. It was its own sort of standalone thing. Is the written word just sort of conglomerated into one big thing now for a lot of these kids?
That's a good question. It's not something that I've explored very fully with them, but I think that they see books as more formal, typically unfun reading, not realizing that they're probably doing as much reading, if not more, through sites and blogs and texting and whatever else it is that they do. So I think I don't know that they would lump books in together with everything else that they're consuming, but I don't think they see them at this point as entertainment vehicles.
Right. Well, now you spent those years at Writer's Digest in what, when you first got there, was a very traditional-minded publishing outlook, and they've grown over the years, as we have tried to do as well. But coming from that, where you're mostly were communicating to adult writers, to oftentimes people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, now having been exposed to the future buyers of books, what would you go back and tell those folks that you spoke to about how they need to proceed moving forward?
Well, you're not going to find your future audience by creating product for stores, for bookstores, for physical outlets. I think that these kids are really spending a lot more time on YouTube, on Facebook, and other sites that cater to their interests. And very few of them are going through what we would consider traditional or authoritative channels to find their content. They're fans of like crowdsourcing sites like Reddit, and I think part of this has to do with their age, and they haven't necessarily matured yet into what I would call like more serious-minded inquiry and investigation. But certainly they're not going to bookstores to find the next thing they're going to read. That's just not going to happen.
One of the things you argue in your book, The Enigma Variations of Future Publishing, by the way, a very entertaining, very funny book, which is about time because people get so serious about this sort of stuff, and I highly recommend it. But you talk about the author of the future being not just an author of books, but a creator of content, as someone who works across mediums. So what do you, for people who want to consider themselves writers and want to consider themselves authors, what do they really need to have in their mind as the image of who they need to ultimately become?
I think that all writers need to think of themselves as media agnostic and instead focus on what is the story I'm trying to tell, or what is the message that I want to share, and how can I best reach my audience with this message? Like, what medium is really going to find them, and what best fits the content that I'm preparing. So to use myself as an example, a lot of the content that I share could be put in a formal book. However, I have been very resistant to doing that because the information changes so quickly, and I feel like it would become outdated. And also, because the types of things that I teach are so complex, not like intellectually complex, but there's so many different facets to it, it raises a lot of questions based on your own personal situation. So that's why I really favor classrooms and teaching environments, whether online or in person, because that allows people to take so much more from what I have to offer than just a static text, which I feel is not suitable for the types of things I'm trying to impart, especially when it comes into the teaching of writing and trying to tell people about storytelling. For me, that while you need to sit alone in a room to write to some extent, you usually don't improve as a writer unless you have some kind of mentor. So that's just using myself as an example of how limited the book form is. Certainly it can be that compendium that people go back to for reference, if they forgot something, to reinforce principles, but it's a very, very small facet of what I could potentially offer.
So an author should be thinking about, beyond writing his or her book, thinking about exploiting video, websites, social media, whatever they can to communicate their story to their author. That has been a sticking point for a lot of authors who are terrified because they don't understand those things. So what's your advice to somebody who says, look, I want to be an author tomorrow, I want to be an author 10 years from now, I know how to write a little bit, I have no idea how to do these other things. Does someone need to learn all of this, or do they just depend on outside people to help them when they need the help?
Well, I'm glad you raised that issue, because I do think it's critical for any storyteller to really focus on the craft and get to a skill level where they have some confidence and mastery of storytelling, and they really understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish through the storytelling. It would probably be premature to send someone off to dabble in social media and play around with audio and video before they really understood what story they want to tell. I think the difficult part in all of this is some of the ways that I think stories are going to get told in the future. It's going to boil down to being able to present them in interactive ways, like through applications like mobile apps or tablet apps, and through things like video. But not every author is going to be able to produce a film, of professional quality, or is going to be able to program an app or to create some software. So I think authors, to some extent, will have to find the appropriate partners for the more for the bigger epic things that they want to accomplish. In the near term, for anyone starting out, I think they just need to be very open to the fact that there's more than one way to tell a story, and it doesn't have to be only in writing, because there are many other ways to reach an audience. So to give a couple of examples, there are a few authors in the podcasting realm who really know how to use that medium well, and they've used podcasting as a companion to the written work that helps grow their audience. podcasts aren't necessarily the focus, but they grant a lot of visibility, and it opens up other opportunities. There's a YA author named John Green who really uses YouTube as a wonderful audience development tool. And you can tell that video is really one of his killer mediums. But he also writes books, and the two complement each other. So I would never tell an author, you can't write in book form any longer. That's dead. I mean, that's totally not true. But there are certainly ways to enhance, promote, reach more people when you use these tools in coordination. And I want to emphasize that they're just tools. They shouldn't be, you shouldn't, just because the tools are there doesn't mean you have to use them. It has to make sense. And you have to have some kind of interest in seeing your work manifested in different forms.
One of the things that we're talking to our people about, who are children's writers and young adult writers, is not to obsess over technology, not to spend all their days worrying about EPUB 3 and EPUB 4 and this and that, but rather, if anything, forget about it, focus on your craft and find people in which we're trying to present to them, find people who can help you when the time comes you say, I need an app or whatever. Because I think that's the sticking point. People see it as a mountain to climb of all this stuff they've never done. But if you say to them, look, don't worry about it. Let other people help you with that. You might have to spend a little money, but let people help you. Focus on your craft. So I totally agree with what you're saying, because ultimately it is still going to always be about the story.
Right, exactly.
One of the things that I've been preaching is that what's happening in the book world now happened in the music world 10 and 15 years ago. Sort of balkanization of music, big labels breaking apart, micro niches being created. And that's been good for the amount of music and for the variety of music, but it's been very bad really for the artists. I mean, now if you're a band and you sell 5,000 CDs, that's considered good, and that's basically gas money for the band. Do you see something like that happening in publishing, where authors are going to have a difficult time making a living because there's so many people out there publishing, and because micro niches will start being created?
It's a terrific question. Part of what I suggest in the ebook I created in a very humorous way is that authors will start to sell off more personalized aspects of their work, like in terms of like setting up evening soirees where they, have one-on-one contact with a select group of people. There are already stories of authors who will give you a vial of blood along with their book. That's for the horror set. But you can kind of see ways in which authors can kind of scale the experience so that they're charging more for the people who are really the devoted and loyal fans. And there are many different ways to do this. It doesn't have to involve bodily fluids. But I think once you become, there's a line I want to draw that I think people forget, where there's a different set of things you do when you're totally unknown, nobody knows your work, you haven't built trust with a readership yet. There's a difference between what you do then and then what you do once you do have some trust, respect, and authority in your genre or category, and you've built up some kind of a following. I think a lot of people I talk to are starting at ground zero, and they really have nothing yet, which means that they can't charge as much. They have to play in the Amazon pricing war game, and they're out there on social media hawking their stuff, and also doing a lot of bad things that annoy people. But there's a real difference between that and then once you have some kind of established career, then being able to produce things that reliably people are going to want to buy. So I think once you reach that point where you have your true fan base, and Kevin Kelly refers to this as your 1,000 true fans, it's probably feasible to sustain a career based on that. Maybe not a rich and lucrative one. It depends on how mass market and appealing your work is, but something that's satisfying. So I think initially, people are talking about how self-publishing and ebooks are kind of like the testing grounds and like where you have to prove yourself in the minor leagues before you make it to the major leagues. And I think there's some truth in that. So, yeah, I hope I didn't just dodge your question.
No, you absolutely didn't. And one of the things that we talk to people about, because we're very big on authors building platforms, marketing themselves, because even if you're published to this point by Random House, chances are you're still going to have to go out and market the book yourself, more or less.
Yes.
And people have this delineation between being a writer and being a marketer. One's okay and one is not. But what we try to tell people is, look, it's all communication. If you're a storyteller, it shouldn't really matter whether you're telling your story in a book or a press release. You're still telling a story. So it's a mindset. And the other thing that people have to get over is thinking about J.D. Salinger and Harper Lee and all these people who sat in a cabin somewhere and wrote these wonderful books and sent it off to an editor and then sat back and the royalty checks flowed in. If that ever really was the paradigm, which it never truly was for most writers, it certainly isn't now. So people have to kind of get over that, don't they?
Yeah. They do, and it is frustrating. I know the phenomenon you're talking about where people mention their favorite best-selling author, whether it's from 5 years ago or 100, and talking about how that person didn't have to market and promote. But you can't compare yourself as an unknown author to someone who is established and can probably make money just by tossing off an essay and sending it to the New York Times. So, and what's scary, and I try to emphasize this with aspiring writers, is that the person who can toss off an essay and send it to the New York Times and make some money, they're probably reaching fewer people in the end than they would by posting it on their own blog if they've been cultivating a following themselves online. And this is something that I'm trying to think of his name. Sam Harris wrote a fabulous blog post on this phenomenon within the last month about how he can reach more people now on his own than he can through a major channel like, Vanity Fair. And it's true. So I think once writers understand that the traditional gatekeepers and media outlets don't necessarily have the distribution power they once did, I think some of this angst might be alleviated.
Right.
I guess you could see it negatively, but I don't see it negatively. And realize that if you build your audience and have that direct line, that's money in the bank. That's an investment over the course of your career. And that's how you...
Sorry, to go back to the music connection, for those bands and artists that are succeeding in music, that's exactly what they've done. They've developed their community, they've nurtured their fans, they've developed their lists, they're selling MP3s to them, they're selling merchandise to them, they're selling tour tickets and all sorts of stuff. And that really is the way that it works in music. And you're right, that's exactly why you need to build a platform. And especially for our authors who are young adult authors, we find that really powerful. I mean, if you look at the connection someone like Lauren Miracle has with her readers, it is so intense and so rewarding. And that's the other thing, that you could be J.D. Salinger in a cabin, but wouldn't it be more fun to have thousands of fans constantly talking to you about what you've written? We're a bit contrarian in terms of the tradition. We ourselves started 20 years ago in a very traditional vein, and writing is by its nature conservative with a small c, the writing world. But we have sort of ruffled some feathers because we believe this is a new golden age. I mean, this is the best thing that can happen to authors, because when we started, the odds of getting published were still minimal, no matter how well we tried to teach people. The odds of getting published now are 100% if you want them to be.
Right.
And to me, that's just exciting. And if you can, get published and publish yourself, print on demand, ebook, app, whatever, and learn to market yourself or trust people to market for you, really the sky is the limit. And it's all about communication, and it can be a lot of fun. So I don't want our viewers who are newer writers to think that we're negative about this. I happen to think that this is a tremendously exciting time to become a writer. It is. I agree. Let me ask you one last thing. We recently were involved in a project with Cory Doctorow, a young adult author and science fiction author, who has he's very opposed to copyright as a concept. And he believes in giving his books away for free, which he does on an ebook version. And he tells us that he actually sells a lot more hard copy books now than he did in the past, because people want the ebook. They get the ebook. They love it. They build a connection with Cory. He's given them something. And the name of the ebook that we put together of his essays is The Problem Isn't Piracy, the Problem is Obscurity, which I think is just really brilliant. But I wonder, as a last note here, what your thoughts are on giving your work away.
I really admire Cory Doctorow, and I feel like I'm in the same camp as he is as far as his philosophies about copyright and giving it away. I do feel some amount of, inner conflict about the issue, because I know in traditional publishing that it's probably bad, at least in the short term, for all authors and all books if work is devalued to the point where people either expect it for free or for 99 cents or, practically free. So, I'm generally not sympathetic to that view in the least. It's kind of like if that's what happens, it's what happens. I don't like to put value judgments on it, but I'm certainly sensitive, especially to my colleagues and other people who have so much investment in the industry that it would really be against 90% of everyone's interests if the value of the book did decline in such a way. However, I don't want to speculate what Cory Doctorow would say, but I think the counter-argument to that is you're not really devaluing the book or your work by giving it away for free. I think it can be seen as an audience development move or a marketing move, and you're merely using that as a way to then charge for something else, something different that holds a more personal value or higher value to that customer. So, I think I should stop there.
I think what Cory's saying is that it actually overvalues or adds value to his hard copy books. And,
yes.
For an author, if you can give away, even if it's just sample chapters, but if you want to give away your whole work and then offer to people who truly love it an autographed copy of the book, let's say, that they buy from you, I think that's really the mentality. It's not so much let's just give away all written word. I think the point is, because I agree with you, just giving things away and devaluing the word, the written word is utterly counterproductive and pointless. But if it leads towards building a career as an author, I think that's really what it's about. And it's really trying to cut through the millions of authors who are out there trying to get their hands on a reader. And whatever you have to do, I suppose, is maybe within, except for giving out bodily fluids, anything you can do that gets people's attention. So
yes.
You blog at janefriedman.com. I highly recommend that everybody check it out. It's a really wonderful blog and very entertaining. The books are tremendous. Enigma Variations, I said, is probably the only thing I've read on the subject that made me laugh at every page, but also was absolutely right on the money. And Jane, any last thoughts that you want to leave for our viewers today?
Only be patient given the time of transformation that we're in. I think a lot of people are expecting overnight results, or they're expecting that after this change there won't be any more. But there will be lots of change ahead, and I think those who can adapt, be flexible, and be consistent with what they're trying to do will probably be rewarded, I hope.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you all again on Right for Kids TV.
Thank you.
Okay.